Perfect. Okay. Welcome, everybody. It looks like we are at go time. As other people come in, we will welcome them in. But because we have so much information today, I wanted to
This meeting is being live streamed. By staying in this meeting, you consent to.
just going through and muting people quickly. I saw a quick question about how long the webinar is. The webinar is 60 minutes. It's about 45 minutes of information, and then we have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A in case anybody has any questions. So today we're going to be talking about transforming our gut microbiome, so utilizing the low FODMAP diet and nurturing our digestive tract at the same time as well. And so we'll jump right into it. If at any point you can't hear me or you can't see the slides or the slides aren't changing, please let me know. I think I have all the technology sorted out, but sometimes that doesn't as well. Yes, the recording will be sent to everybody via email. So as long as you haven't unsubscribed from us, you will get that email as well. Any resources I talk about throughout the session today as well, I will also be sending out in an email after the session. So today, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to start with a quick welcome, a quick intro. I'll introduce myself as well as Shani and FODShop, and then we'll go into talking about what the gut microbiome is, just to ensure that everyone has good baseline information about what we're going to then build upon. We're going to talk about what the low FODMAP diet is, and then we're going to talk about whether or not the low FODMAP diet is ruining our gut microbiome. We'll talk about how to maintain a good, healthy microbiome and what to do next. And then we'll dive into the best part, Q&A. I want to make sure that you all get what you need from the session today. So any questions that you have, I'll answer some throughout. Shani will answer some throughout as well in the chat box, but we'll also welcome you to turn your mic on during that live Q&A time as well. Okay, so diet versus disease. I see a lot of familiar names, which I love to see, and clients I've worked with in the past. But for anybody who's not familiar, diet versus disease is a global gut health team. We specialize in IBS, IBD, diverticulitis, Crohn's, colitis, celiac disease, and mast cell activation syndrome, histamine intolerance, and more. And so these are some of the clinicians or some of our clinical team. We are made up of dietitians, mindset coaches, gut-directed hypnotherapists as well. And there's me up here. I am one of the dietitians on the team. I'm also a certified diabetes educator and I have a master's of health education, which is why I love providing education sessions such as this for you all. I see, I think, a comment on not being able to hear. Can some of you hear me okay? If anybody
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I never know. Okay, I see some yeses. If you cannot hear me, it might be your volume, but I don't think that will help because you can't hear me anyhow. So hopefully some people get that sorted out. Thank you to those that answered there. Okay. And then we also are joined today by Shani, and she is one of the nutritionists, and she is the director at FODShop. And Lisa also helped us with some of the content for today, but she's not able to join us live. And for anyone that's not familiar with FODShop, FODShop is the world's first online FODMAP expert nutritionist run shop and gastroenterology resource. For anybody following a low FODMAP diet, I know that how challenging it is to find lots of those low FODMAP products. And so they are also joining us today to help with some of the nutrients, to chat a little bit about that as well, about their FODShop. Shani, do you want to add anything that I might have forgot about FODShop? I'm not sure if she...
Sorry, yes, I was muted. Sorry, Taylor. I was just saying thank you very much for the warm introduction. Yes, you've summed that up perfectly, Taylor. Yes, we are an online low FODMAP and IBS gastroenterology specialist resource for dietitians and patients to find low FODMAP by ingredient and low FODMAP certified food products that are safe to consume while following a low FODMAP diet. So hopefully you find some good product recommendations throughout today's webinar to help you along your journey.
Awesome, thank you. And I have a poll. So I've set up a few polls and questions for us all today. So let me see if I can launch my first one. And polls and quizzes. And we're going to launch the first one. So we're currently faced with a challenging and significant problem in regards to many individuals struggling with digestive health symptoms. And I like to ask this question because I think a lot of people aren't always aware of how many individuals are struggling with different digestive symptoms. Now, of course, a lot of people here today are probably experiencing that, or one of their loved ones is, because we're here. But I like to ask the question, how many adults currently suffer from a diagnosed digestive symptom? I should have added diagnosed in there as well. We don't have the numbers for those that are not. Oh, it's good to see lots of people answering. Perfect. Okay. I will continue on. So yes, in terms of individuals that are facing a significant or suffering from or managing digestive health issues, it's actually 25%. So that's 1 in 4 adults are currently struggling with a chronic digestive health condition. And again, this is those that are diagnosed, and there's likely more individuals that are also struggling that might not be diagnosed. We don't have all the numbers on that as well. And so I like to start with this, and I wanted to start with this to let you know you are not alone. I think a lot of the times we don't talk about our digestion and our bowel movements and running to the bathroom and our gas and bloating. And so we don't always recognize how many individuals are also struggling with this as well. I'm going to end the poll there. It looks like a lot of you got that right. And yes, it's one that I like to chat about a little bit. These polls, again, are just for fun, so they're not being graded or marked or anything like that. Sometimes it can be a big surprise to people. The other piece I like to mention is that research also finds that symptoms do not improve as we age, but in fact, symptoms can often increase in intensity, so worsen, and we can also see more and more individuals suffer with these digestive health conditions as we get older as well, for a variety of reasons. And so we are here today to help you with that, so that your symptoms hopefully will not continue to worsen as well. Okay. So guess what is completely unique to you? And given that this is a gut health presentation, you might already know the answer, but you're welcome to pop it into the chat box if you know what the answer to this is, or what is often referred to as our second fingerprint. Gut microbiome, ding, 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 absolutely. Yeah, so our gut microbiome, we have 100 trillion microbes in our gut, and these are unique to each individual. So everybody's gut microbiome is different. And when we are talking about our gut microbiome, we're going to talk about certain bacteria that are perhaps more helpful or less helpful. This doesn't mean that we have a specific amount that we're aiming for, because they're all different. I sometimes like to use a map analogy when I talk about our gut microbiome. And what I mean by this is we might all be trying to get to a specific area or range, but how we get there is going to have to look different. For example, if we're all trying to go to Alberta, which is where I am, where you start is going to matter for the directions and how to get there. If you're in Australia, or if you're in Australia, how to get to Alberta is going to vary from if you're in New York or if you're in another part of Canada. And so that's also where we'll talk about different strategies today of how to get towards where you're wanting to go. But what that might look like is going to be different to your unique journey and your unique microbiome too. So what is the gut microbiome specifically? Again, it's a combination of bacteria and archaea and viruses and parasites and fungi that make up a colony that work together and create different nutrients and postbiotics that can really benefit ourselves. I like to use a little Skittle analogy as well, in terms of we want a lot of diversity, a lot of different colors and a lot of different components. So again, those different archaea and bacteria and viruses, which will all have different roles within our body as well. So the gut microbiome ultimately is made up of a lot of living components that interact with our body to create these helpful benefits as well. So why does the gut microbiome matter? Why at all do we care? The gut microbiome and all those living beings help with our hormone regulation. They help with our immunity through something called gut tissue as well. They help with our digestion, and they help with breaking down food and synthesizing different vitamins and minerals, so creating different vitamins and minerals. And they help with our cardiovascular health, just to name a few. A lot of people refer to it as our second brain as well. And so it's a really important one to help us, to help maximize, to help our overall health and wellness, not just our digestive symptoms we might be experiencing too. Shani, is there anything you want to add there before I start chatting about the low FODMAP diet? Oh, you're muted.
I keep doing that. Sorry, guys. I was just going to add, having microbial diversity in the gut, etc., is also very effective for weight management and weight control. So the way that the gut microbiome communicates with other systems in the body is a very interesting area in terms of weight management as well.
Oh, that's such a good point. And even, yeah, blood sugar management, liver health, skin health. There's so many important and fascinating areas of research in that area too. Thank you for adding that. Okay, so up next, we're going to jump into part 2 of our baseline work, or that foundational work. What is a low FODMAP diet? So it's a therapeutic diet that is often used to help manage various gastrointestinal symptoms. So it might be used for those with IBS, IBD, diverticulitis, and more, or diverticulosis as well. With that being said, of course, if you also have, say, celiac disease, we'll also want to individualize it to minimizing the protein gluten. But if you're still experiencing symptoms, a low FODMAP diet, in addition to that, will also be helpful. So again, we still want to tailor it to your unique diagnoses and gut health, but it can really help minimize those symptoms. FODMAPs are fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And when we consume these components, they can sometimes be poorly digested by some individuals, which is where we get that gas or bloating or diarrhea or constipation as well. So I have another fun poll, well, maybe fun to me, that I do want to put up for us. So let me quickly launch that one. I think it'll pop up here. I like to ask this one just so that I get an idea. Did that launch for us? I think so. Yes, okay. I like to ask these questions just so I get an idea of who is actually following a low FODMAP elimination and reintroduction. Where are we at in terms of our reintroductions and maintenance? And it also gives me an idea of what areas we should maybe talk about a little bit more, in case we have a lot of people who aren't super familiar with any of the phases. Oh, awesome. We have a really good mix. We have about 40% on the elimination, 30% in reintroduction and testing, 20% in maintenance. And we have about 70% of individuals here that are already following a low FODMAP elimination and reintroduction. I'd be really curious if you're comfortable sharing in the chat box how that's been going for you and how the process has been, whether it's been something that's been really valuable for you so far, really confusing, overwhelming. Most people say overwhelming, so you're definitely not alone. I'm going to share the results because it's nice to sometimes see that. But we have, yeah, about 68%, about 70% that are following low FODMAP. If you can say no to, you cannot submit without, Oh, I see. When you say no, you have to answer another one. Oh, overwhelming. Absolutely. Yes.
I think it's also important to note there that the elimination phase of the low FODMAP diet is a very short phase. So it should be from 4 to 6 weeks, and it should obviously be overseen by a registered dietitian or an accredited practicing dietitian. If you are viewing this webinar from Australia, we use the APD, or accredited practicing dietitian credential. So if you are struggling or feeling quite overwhelmed, it is good to get that clinical support from somebody trained in nutrition to help you through that very restrictive phase.
Yes, that's such a good point. Okay, thank you all for sharing that. I'm going to stop sharing those results to the poll, and it looks like, there we go. Awesome. And so as Shani mentioned, there are 3 stages of the low FODMAP diet. And that's a perfect segue. In terms of stage 1, the elimination phase, we're wanting that to be kind of 4-6 weeks, maybe 8 to 12, again, depending on the person. And then the next phase is that challenge or testing phase. And this is where we strategically want to test the different FODMAP groups to see which ones you react to in what amounts. And that can then help us lead us into that integration or maintenance or personalization phase as well. And it is challenging. I saw somebody else in the comments say it's frustrating when there's other things that can derail the process. And it's really true. A lot of the times we also have other non-FODMAP contributors that are also causing symptoms, whether it be spicy foods or caffeine or high fat foods, if we also have bile acid diarrhea or a lot of other pieces of the puzzle we're fitting together with it. In the second part of the presentation, when I talk about how to also nurture our gut microbiome when we're following a low FODMAP elimination, I'm going to talk about things we can incorporate, because a lot of the times it feels so restricting and we just end up eating the same thing over and over again, and we're worried about stacking, and we're worried about is this food high or low, or where does it fit? And also focusing on what we can have can sometimes be really valuable for people as well. Yes, acid reflux can also complicate it. With that being said, acid reflux can sometimes be triggered by FODMAPs as they ferment in our transverse colon right under our rib cage. When it ferments and expands, it puts pressure up on our stomach and can sometimes also trigger reflux symptoms for people too. At the end of this webinar, for those of you who are new to the low FODMAP diet, in the email I send out, I will also send out our Eat This, Not That low FODMAP list. And I highly encourage you to really focus on the green part of the list where you'll have those options of the FODMAP foods or the lower FODMAP foods to focus on. I like to emphasize this is a low FODMAP diet. It's not a no FODMAP diet. What I mean by that is our goal isn't to completely eliminate these FODMAP compounds. It's to reduce them as well. So not completely FODMAP free, it's low FODMAP or reduced FODMAP as well. And then there we go. So now the question of the day, is the low FODMAP diet ruining my gut microbiome? And ruining might be a really harsh word, but what I mean by that is it causing a depletion in our variety or that bacterial balance? Is it causing a reduced, again, variety, diversity, or too much of certain bacteria as well? And the answer to that question is maybe. And the reason I say maybe is because it also depends on how we are implementing this. And this has been a hot topic in the literature. And I think it was about 8 months ago, there was a research study released that kind of shook people, because we had previously said, yes, it definitely reduces our gut microbiome diversity. It's hard on our gut microbiome, the low FODMAP diet, even though it helps manage symptoms. However, that study showed that we are able to implement a low FODMAP diet in a balanced way to also help support our healthy bacteria and to prevent that depletion in some of those bacteria too. Okay. So what I'm going to go into next are some of the key nutrients to focus on. I'm going to start broad. So for those of you not following a low FODMAP elimination, or you're in that maintenance phase or personalization phase where you know your thresholds and know what FODMAPs you're able to incorporate. And then we'll dive into talking about how to incorporate those nutrients while you're on the low FODMAP portion of the diet too. And then Shani will help with really pointing in the direction of what products. That's always the question I get from clients. I don't want to be standing looking in the aisle for hours at what ingredients are in it. So she'll help us depict that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was fiber. And I know I sound like a broken record. I'm sure a lot of people here just eat more fiber, and then their symptoms get worse and worse and worse and worse as they eat more and more and more fiber, whether it's constipation or bloating. So the key here is not necessarily just getting more and more FODMAP or more and more fiber necessarily. It's also about that variety as well. And I see someone said, I still don't understand what a FODMAP is. Okay, so a FODMAP is a fermentable carbohydrate. So it's a compound, and actually I'll back up because I do want to make sure that for those of you who are not super familiar with what a FODMAP is. So a FODMAP is a fermentable compound. And when we consume these fermentable compounds, ideally our body can break them down well, and our bacteria are going to also break these down well. Sometimes if we don't break them down well, it causes off-gassing. And so this excess gas and extra fluid getting pulled into our bowel can sometimes trigger symptoms of bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation as well. So it's not that FODMAPs themselves are bad, it's that sometimes our bodies don't digest them well for a variety of different reasons, whether it be we have dysbiosis or a imbalance of bacteria, or it could also be that we might be experiencing other digestive shifts that cause us to not digest it well for some people as well. So I hope that helps to clarify a little bit more about what low FODMAP is. And I would also take a peek at our Diet vs. Disease website, or even FODCHAP website. We did a webinar last year where we dive a little bit more into what FODMAPs are specifically as well. So in terms of some of those components we're wanting to incorporate, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, and resistant starches are some of the variety of fibers we like to incorporate. One thing people often notice when they start looking at the low FODMAP list and the high FODMAP list is a lot of foods that are typically rich in a lot of fibers are high FODMAP. And so when we start going into that elimination phase, we'll see a reduction in a lot of those foods that can contain a lot of the healthy fibers that we're wanting to integrate or eat and consume. So soluble fibers, I like to think of these as like the gel forming fibers. So the fibers that when you mix with water, they turn into a bit of like a gel, and that could be things like oats or chia seeds. Beans and legumes are technically high FODMAP. The elimination phase. It can be really hard to get enough soluble fiber during that elimination phase. So some people opt for a supplement during that stage to get enough of that. Soluble fiber helps soften our really hard stools if we're more constipated. And it can also help with thickening or solidifying our looser stools. So it can be great for both diarrhea, constipation, or that IBS-M where we're going back and forth between both as well. Insoluble fiber. So this is the fiber that doesn't break down. It's that roughage. It's the one that goes right through us. I shouldn't say right through us, but goes through us without breaking down or mixing with water like that soluble fiber does. I should also note a lot of foods are a combination of multiple fibers. And insoluble fibers as well, incorporating some of those low FODMAP fiber sources through foods or supplements can be really helpful for helping things move through us or motility wise. The third one I'm going to focus on, and there's more than just these fibers, but the other one I really want to focus on today are resistant starches. So these are fibers that go all the way through our small intestine, and then they can start to break down or ferment slowly in our large intestine, and it can give us a prebiotic benefit. So that's food for our bacteria in our digestive tract and in our colon. This can be things like green bananas, which can be higher FODMAP. It can also be in some unprocessed whole grains, and it's also higher in cooked and cooled foods. So for example, if we cook rice and then cool it, it will have higher amounts of resistant starches. And one study actually found that even cooling potatoes overnight after cooking tripled their resistant starch content. So this triples the amount of, or potentially triples the amount of that resistant or healthy starch to feed our healthy bacteria. This also can help with our blood sugar management and our hormone regulation as well. And it's important to also note that everyone's body does break things down a little bit differently. And every food, when you cook and cool it, will have different levels. So I can't give you an exact amount of resistant starch, but it can vary. Other examples that can occur with would be barleys, peas, lentils, beans. Those are high in GOs. So GOs are one of the FODMAP categories. So sticking more towards potatoes or rice or a supplement is going to be helpful during the elimination phase as well. I see such good questions coming in. I'm going to save the probiotic question for the end. Do you have to eat the rice or potato cold? You can reheat it and it still maintains that higher amount of resistant starch. When you reheat it, some of that can break down or shift a little bit, but you can still get that benefit. If you're someone who's also managing your diabetes or blood sugar, the other thing you can do is do a test right before eating, say, a freshly cooked pot of rice 2 hours after and watch your spike. And then if you cool that rice and eat it, then heat it up again the next day and try it again. So you'll test right before and then 2 hours after, you can also see the differences in the regulation of your blood sugar. That's a little bit off topic, but another one as well. So I'd like to ask you all, what are your favorite go-to low FODMAP fiber examples? I'll also pull out some in a moment here, but I always like to ask you as well, since many of you, I think it's about 70% of you are also on at least a part of the low FODMAP diet. So resistant starches are a benefit. They're very good for our, yes, berries. You do have to watch serving size, great one. Shani, sweet potatoes, awesome. That's another one we want to watch. Serving size, kiwi, love that one. Another fun fact about kiwi is it's great for IBS-C or constipation. So 2 kiwis a day can have some fabulous benefits for IBS-C or IBS constipation. Rice, yeah, mashed potatoes, cucumbers, yeah, absolutely, cucumbers, papaya, those are some really good ones. Another one I like would be carrots, which has 2.1 grams of fiber per 75 grams. Another one would be quinoa. It also has some extra protein. Yeah, rice pasta is a great one, quinoa pasta. Tomatoes, we have to be cautious of the type and the portion, but that's another one that I like. Pineapple as well, can also about 1 cup chopped pineapple is going to be low FODMAP. Carrots, chard, sweet potato, carrots, yeah, awesome. Is grapefruit low FODMAP? Good question. Grapefruit actually falls higher on the FODMAP list. If we're wanting to have a low FODMAP portion of grapefruit, I'm just double checking. We would want to stay at about 80 grams, which is about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of grapefruit would be a low FODMAP portion. So grapefruit contains fructan specifically. Yeah, you're welcome. Awesome. Some really good ones popping up here. Cabbage, cauliflower, oatmeal. Yep. And with oatmeal, one thing I like to mention to people is quick oats versus steel cut oats also will have a bit of a difference as well. So with oatmeal, quick oats, you have a lower low FODMAP portion as well. So with oatmeal, quick oats, we like to keep it at more of a 1/4 cup portion. With some of the steel cut oats, up to a 1/2 cup portion as well. That will vary a little bit, and that's being a little bit extra cautious, and it'll vary a little bit from brand to brand and how you cook it as well. Isn't cauliflower a high FODMAP? It does have a high FODMAP portion. So with cauliflower, that's a really good comment. At 3/4 of a cup, it's high in mannitol. If people are consuming it lower FODMAP, I would usually keep it less than 1/4 of a cup, but sometimes I'll fully pull it out because it is one that is pretty high mannitol. So that's a really good question. Is Metamucil a good source of fiber? It is. So Metamucil contains psyllium husk, which can be a really great fiber. It's a great source of soluble and a gum-forming fiber as well. Some people do get a little bit of gas and bloating from it. So sometimes it's not always the best fit, but it really depends on the person. And that's where we want to trial and error. But those are some fabulous. Does cooling rice increase histamine? Yes, if you're low histamine, on a low histamine diet, that wouldn't be the best option for you, but from a low FODMAP perspective, that would be great. So next, I actually want to talk about some of the other FODShop fiber examples, especially since it can be hard to implement those low FODMAP portions of fiber containing foods. And I'll pass it over to Shani for this part.
Yes, so we've got a few different options here. We've got partially hydrolyzed guar gums, so that's the sun fiber on the left and the Wonder Foods variety on the right. Then you've got Regular Girl, which is the PHGG or partially hydrolyzed guar gum. Plus it also has some probiotics added. And I would discuss that with your dietitian to ensure that the combination of prebiotics plus probiotics are suitable for you, because there's lots of conflicting literature out there about what probiotic strains are best for you with your specific symptoms. The next one is K-fiber. That's a general prebiotic supplement, which is fantastic for maintaining general gut health. So helps with regularity. I believe there are also some varieties of K-fiber that do have added kiwi fruit extract. Added kiwi fruit extract, which can help as a bowel stimulant. So I would again discuss the use of all of these prebiotic fiber supplements with your registered or accredited practicing dietitian to ensure that which product is best for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shani. And I just saw a question about what does GOs stand for? GOs or GOS stands for galacto-oligosaccharides. That is one of the FODMAP compounds that we minimize during the elimination phase of the low FODMAP diet as well. I was just trying to type it in and it wouldn't go through. So I thought I would just answer that one. Oops. Now as well. Okay, let's see. Perfect. So then the next portion that I like to focus on to help ensure that we're nurturing our gut microbiome while we are on the low FODMAP diet, but also after, is getting a good variety of prebiotics, probiotics for a symbiotic relationship, and postbiotics. So what are prebiotics? Prebiotics include some of those dietary fiber foods that we just talked about and supplements. Not all fibers have prebiotic capacity or are prebiotics, but many are. And that variety can be really helpful for feeding different bacteria. So probiotics are the bacteria that are living in our digestive tracts. So the gut microbiome I had talked about earlier, and that variety and diversity, those are the probiotics that live in our gut. So when we eat prebiotics, it gives fuel to our probiotics. When they mix together, our probiotics start to digest these different prebiotics. Hopefully our bacteria don't have IBS, and they create a postbiotic metabolite produced by, so those postbiotics are the waste of our bacteria. So if we think of the food we eat, our bacteria eat some of that as well. And then when they mix together, they will create a byproduct or a waste product. And that waste product gives our bodies really good benefits. It can help build a good mucosal lining in our digestive tract. It can also help create, if you've ever heard of butyrate or acetate or some of those components, that would be examples of some of the short chain fatty acids or postbiotics or the waste of our bacteria as well. And I should mention, so incorporating some of those different probiotics and postbiotics in the right balance can be helpful along with those prebiotics. Now, supplementing probiotics specifically for what you need is important. During the low FODMAP phase, we usually eliminate probiotic supplementation, usually, not always. This can also help us minimize the variables or the different factors that are going on, but also a lot of probiotic supplements aren't necessarily the right strain of bacteria that we might need, or might not be, or might contain extra ingredients such as inulin that we are not, which is not low FODMAP, for example, or fructooligosaccharides as well. And so we often minimize a lot of those specific probiotics until later on, unless we're specifically targeting something. In IBS, we sometimes specifically target with a bifidobacterium strain. With constipation, it will sometimes be a lactobacillus reuteri. With post-infectious IBS, it might be a Saccharomyces boulardii, but again, it's going to be really different person to person depending on your symptoms.
Yes, so I'll just jump in, Taylor, and say it's often important to make sure that if you are going to use a probiotic, that if you're already using one before you start FODMAP elimination, just to continue using it, or if you're thinking of starting one, don't start it until after elimination. That way we keep everything as stable as possible. That way we can pinpoint FODMAP triggers more accurately.
Such a good point. A lot of the times, I know when we're in flare-up or not feeling well, we want to do everything to feel better. But when you change everything at once, from a clinical perspective, but also for you, it'll be really hard to know what's working, what's not. Is something making us better while something else is making us worse? And because our microbiomes are all unique to us, we do have to do a bit of trial and error. Unfortunately, there's currently no way for us to just do like a test and tell you exactly what direction or what directions on your microbiome map are going to lead us to where we want to go. It's a bit of trial and error. So that's a really good point as well. So the next one I like people to focus on incorporating. So we talked about fibers to incorporate. We talked about some of the prebiotics and probiotics and postbiotics as well. And then we're also fermented foods. So fermented foods are also a really important one to incorporate. And they are also lower FODMAP a lot of the times. So some of these fermented foods might include a lactose-free kefir, for example. It might include kimchi, pickled carrots, or sauerkraut. A fun fact, pickled onions, because of the processing, are actually lower FODMAP than other FODMAP components as well. The next one I like to incorporate at least daily, if not with most meals, are plant-based fats or different healthy anti-inflammatory fats. These will help with absorbing fat-soluble vitamins and minerals, including vitamins A, D, E, and K. They also contain MUFAs and PUFAs, so those are monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, which are really great for our cholesterol. And they also help with increasing our bifidobacterium, our lactobacillus, and our short-chain fatty acids, such as, for example, the butyrate that we talked about earlier as well. And it can help reduce some of the bacteria that we're wanting to reduce as well. So it has a bit of that anti-pathogenic bacteria capacity as well. How much sauerkraut can you eat? So we do recommend still variety with fermented foods. So too much is not necessarily better, but a lot of dietitians and dietitian colleagues will even recommend like a shot of sauerkraut or a fermented food of some sort per day to get some of that benefit. And then to incorporate some of those plant-based fats as well. Olive oil is excellent for this. And I love olive oil because it's a great way to incorporate FODMAP, high FODMAP flavors in a low FODMAP way. For example, FOD Shop has infused oils, or there's many different, you can also infuse oils yourself, but olive oils are a great way to get polyphenols as well as antioxidants and have some of those anti-inflammatory fats in there too. And garlic infused oils or onion infused oils are also going to contain that garlic flavor without having any FODMAPs in it. So avocados are very high FODMAP. Avocado oil is lower FODMAP as well. You're absolutely right. So avocados are going to be high at about 1/8 or more of an avocado. So we want to keep our avocado portion low. The infused oils or the oils are going to be low FODMAP due to processing as well. If you have fat malabsorption, so BAM, bile acid malabsorption, or fecal fat malabsorption, we'd want to keep our fat portion low. A lot of the times I'll set my clients to a certain amount per meal and spread it out per day and pair it with a good fiber, especially a soluble fiber, to help minimize some of that fat, whilst the fat malabsorption or BAM, bile acid malabsorption, while still getting some of those benefits as well. Has anybody tried some of the infused oils? I find they're great in salad dressings and great to get some of that flavor. When you're missing garlic, I'm a huge garlic fan, so that's why, yes, they're amazing. Good. I'm glad some other people have tried it. Yeah, absolutely.
I personally love the roasted onion infused olive oil. It's not something that you can easily do yourself at home, but you can absolutely create roasted onion and roasted garlic infused olive oils at home if you want to. You simply just have to fry off your onions and garlics within the olive oil, but make sure that you're removing the parts of the garlic and onion before you go ahead and use the oil. Otherwise, your FODMAPs will leach into the rest of your food. Because FODMAPs are water soluble, and wherever water goes, FODMAPs will follow. So definitely important to remove your onion and garlic from the olive oil before you use your oil.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Shani. And yes, The good point on the water soluble versus fat soluble, because I have some clients that make broths with their garlic and pull the garlic out, that's going to be high FODMAP. It's just with oils that it's low FODMAP as well. Okay. The next nutrient I like to focus on, and it's actually a whole bundle of nutrients, is polyphenols and phytonutrients. And lots of people may have heard eat the rainbow or eat lots of different colors as well. There's a reason why. So for example, red foods contain a compound called lycopene. It's a really important nutrient, and it actually is in red foods such as tomatoes, so in a low FODMAP portion. And when we heat them up, we're going to be able to utilize and absorb that lycopene even more. It helps with our bacteria ratio in our guts, and it also helps feed a really great bacteria that helps with inflammation in our gut too. So incorporating some of those red foods. I put this slide here for all transparency because people always ask me, what's the superfood or what's the one food I should eat the most of? And this is trying to highlight the importance of that variety. And so eating some of those tomatoes in a low FODMAP portion can help get you that lycopene, especially if we heat it up. An example would be orange foods as well, really help with our intestinal barrier, so that mucosal lining in our gut, and incorporating a variety of those can also be helpful. Yellow foods, again, help with our digestive health and can also have an anti-inflammatory capacity. So incorporating some of our yellow foods, so a small low FODMAP portion of yellow peppers, for example, might be a way we can do that. And then our green foods as well have some really great benefits that if we're able to incorporate, we highly recommend, again, for that anti-inflammatory, but also for some of the hormone balance that can occur and help our digestive tract as well. Has anybody else heard of Eat the Rainbow before? I use it and I always assume people have, but yeah, Shani has. Okay, good. And yes, I sometimes will even have people use a bit of a checklist, like in your month. It doesn't have to be Eat the Rainbow every day, but even in the month, have you had some of the red foods and orange foods, yellow foods, green foods? Our body doesn't work in a 24-hour currency. It can store and use nutrients at different times, but within our grocery shop, do we have some foods from different categories as well? Okay, so just to do a quick summary before I go into some of the next stages as well. So we talked about what is our gut microbiome. It's the bacteria that live in our gut and some of the other living things. We talked about the low FODMAP diet briefly in terms of what it is. It's a reduction in those fermentable compounds that can ferment in our digestive tract and trigger symptoms for some people, not everybody, but some people. We talked about the phases of the low FODMAP diet, and now we've talked about some of the key nutrients to focus on incorporating while you're following a low FODMAP diet. And now we're going to chat about what are some other steps, and actually I'm going to ask this to you all. What are some other steps that can also, I'm not going to say one, but I'm going to ask you some other ones that maybe you use to help manage your gut microbiome. Perhaps it's gut-directed hypnotherapy, for example. Nerva, yes, Nerva is a fabulous one. We use that in our exercise. Beautiful, love that. Meditation. Yeah, I love Insight Timer for some really good IBS specific ones as well as Nerva. Just starting salmon, exercise, bone broth. Wonderful.
I was also going to add, it's important not to just stick to the same foods from a dietary standpoint. We want to create as much diversity of in introducing as many different food groups as possible after you've gone through FODMAP elimination and pinpointed your dietary FODMAP triggers. As you slowly start to reintroduce FODMAP groups in tolerable portions, it's important to have as much variety within food groups as possible. So if you're able to tolerate bread, perhaps having some multi-grain bread and so some rye bread if you can. And if you're introducing dairy, to have different types of dairy, or if you're introducing cereals, different types of grains within different cereals, of course, being mindful of your triggers, but being able to introduce as much diversity as possible helps feed lots of different species of good bacteria in your gut, which of course gives you all of those wonderful benefits that Taylor mentioned earlier.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shani. And I saw some awesome, the abdominal massage. I love an ILU massage. I saw some people mention peppermint oil. So peppermint's a great antispasmodic and can reduce spasming in the gut. A low inflammation diet. So a lot of people use a Mediterranean style, which can be helpful. I know that there's a few people on the call, it looks like, that are low histamine. So that's different than low FODMAP, but that can be a trigger. Meal spacing, absolutely. Our posture can also play a large role in reflux and digestion. Our posture, even on the toilet, can play a large role. Love hearing these strategies. And one thing, I see Beano. So yes, enzymes and enzymes specific to the FODMAP we're wanting to break down. One that I do love is FODzyme because it helps with fructans, lactose, NGOs. One thing I would be cautious with Beano is it does contain a bit of mannitol. So if you're someone who isn't sensitive to mannitol, Beano might not be for you, but for other people, it might work fabulously. So it really depends on the gut. So ultimately, what I wanted to say here is, what is one simple step that can resolve our gut issues? Well, to answer that question, we first need to understand, do we know what's special about our fingerprint or our unique gut microbiome and what pieces work and don't work? And it is a bit of trial and error. The other thing I like to mention is what works for your friend's IBS might not work for yours. Not to feel discouraged. It's not something you're necessarily doing wrong. It is about finding the pieces that work for you. No other human on this planet has the exact same fingerprint as you. So we really want to look at what is unique about yours and what are the unique strategies and skills that are going to work for you to manage and improve your gut. One thing that can be helpful is finding a system that individualizes and personalizes things to you and takes a multifaceted approach. So the NERVA, gut-directed hypnotherapy, low FODMAP or low histamine, or tweaking your fibers and helping you find the products that will set you up for success. And so what does this mean for you? The one simple step I would say is asking yourself again, what is unique about your gut? Where is your gut at? And what is its unique triggers? What boat are you in? Someone can tell you where to start based upon some of the factors that we might be able to determine in an assessment. So symptoms and diagnoses and lifestyle. But again, it's going to be some of that trial and error. And the best way, in my experience, to help that be as efficient as possible is also going to be working with individuals who are specialized in that area. If you are wanting to work on gut-directed hypnotherapy, working with somebody trained in gut-directed hypnotherapy, if you're working on your pelvic floor, working on someone who's trained in those areas is going to really help increase that as well. It's more important what boat you're in than how hard you row. And I like to emphasize that because in continuing to do the same thing over and over again, if you're feeling like you're getting nowhere, we definitely want people to change or tweak up their plan as well. And so what I would like to welcome you to, I just don't want to cut into our Q&A time. So if you, before I jump into Q&A, if anybody is interested, if you're not already on the Diet vs. Disease program or one of our programs, if you're curious if our methodology would be something that works for you, I welcome you to take our short quiz. I'll email it out after with our free resources, including our low FODMAP list. You can also enter www.dietversusdisease.com/book. I'll try to put it in the chat box too. And you're welcome to complete that quiz as well to see if it is a good fit for you as well. And then we will jump into some of the questions as well. I see lots that have popped up. Shani, do you want to start with, I saw a question about shipping with FODShop, if you want to start with that, and I'll dig for a few other questions.
Yes, sorry, yes, does FODShop ship to Canada? Yes, FODShop ships to Canada and the US and worldwide.
Perfect. And then I saw a question about, what was it here? What about the bad bacteria? I'm not 100% sure if you mean if you have SIBO, so small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. If we have high levels of bad bacteria, there's a few things we'll want to look at doing. Number one is nurturing our healthy bacteria and increasing their resiliency. This can also help manage or prevent bad bacteria, specific probiotics can help prevent, for example, traveler's diarrhea or that type of bad bacteria. If we have SIBO, we will want to look at treatment. We'll often use Xifaxan, for example, for hydrogen overgrowth, which is an antibiotic, or a Xifaxan and neomycin combination for a methane bacteria overgrowth. However, we can't just target the bad bacteria. When we deplete the bad bacteria, we also deplete our healthy bacteria. So then we're wanting to focus on the components that we just talked about as well to increase those healthy bacteria again and increase their health, their resiliency. So by resiliency, I mean their ability to bounce back when we get food poisoning, or we come down with the flu, or we have traveler's diarrhea, or we have an IBS flare-up as well. So I hope that answers that. Have you seen the low FODMAP diet help with lymphocytic colitis? I've been on the diet for about 3 months and have not seen mostly mixed results. Oh, really good question. So this is going to be a yes and a no, or yes, no answer. It's a little bit complex. So with IBD or microscopic colitis, such as lymphocytic colitis or collagenous colitis, there are some individuals that do have overlapping IBS symptoms and gut irritation where low FODMAP or certain FODMAPs can trigger symptoms for them. However, there are going to be other strategies, whether it be medication management or other gut irritants that will sometimes trigger symptoms as well, because there can be that low-grade inflammation there. That's where we also will sometimes need either medication, a biologic, or a steroid to help bring some of that inflammation down. And that's where you'd want to partner both together and then really work on building a really resilient microbiome through potentially some supplements, through really balanced eating, balanced being a variety of those fibers and nutrients that we talked about earlier. I have anecdotally worked with a lot of clients who have had a lot of improvement in symptoms low FODMAP. If you've been on it for 3 months, I would definitely want to look at pivoting what you're doing or shifting something up. We would usually see that improvement in symptoms or a new baseline at around that 3, 4 to 6 weeks. So I would want you to do some reintroductions to see if at all any of them are triggers for you. And if not, I would want to explore some other options as well. Are there any randomized controlled studies? Oh, yes. And then Shani sent them. Fabulous. Yes, and we actually just did a webinar. I said just, but it might have actually been more like 6 months ago with one of our clinical hypnotherapists on gut-directed therapy and how the science behind some of the vagus nerve work as well. That's something to definitely check out because there's really fabulous clinical evidence for it, and the neuroplasticity shifts and the changes in our vagus nerve as well. I think a lot of times when people hear hypnotherapy, they perceive it as, oh, the symptoms are all in our head, which is a terrible thing. And I never want anybody to feel that. But when we're doing that gut-directed hypnotherapy, it's actually interacting with that highway or the nervous system between our brain signaling and our digestive tract, which is our second brain in a sense. And when that highway is either detouring things the wrong way or sending things at too high of a speed or not going fast enough, it can really throw off our digestion too. Can enzyme supplement for substances you don't have a problem with be bad? We don't typically encourage this. There's not a ton of research around it. So I don't like to use a black and white, yes, it's good, yes, it's bad. But we often prefer people to only supplement for example, if you do not have a FODMAP intolerance, I do not want everybody going out and taking enzymes for FODMAPs if it's not needed. If you have a histamine intolerance, no need for FODMAP enzymes. If you have a FODMAP intolerance, no need for histamine enzymes, for example. And that's where really determining what enzymes you need can be really valuable. It also gives you more control. So that's where those threshold testing with FODMAPs can be helpful. You'll know, okay, I actually do need FODzyme when I have beans and lentils because I react to Cheetos and fructans, but taking FODzyme with mushrooms, which contain mannitol, might not be helpful as well. I hope that kind of answers that question. I was told that sourdough bread is low FODMAP. People are often not aware that many of the breads in supermarkets are labeled sourdough. Yes, really good question. So Sourdough is low FODMAP. It's not gluten-free, so it's not celiac friendly, but it is low FODMAP. So when it's a true sourdough from starter, the bacteria in the sourdough starter breaks down some of the fructans outside of our body. And so the fructan amount is a lot lower in a true sourdough. A lot of sourdoughs aren't necessarily a true sourdough in the sense that sometimes extra yeast will be added, which makes it a quick fermentation, and the yeast doesn't break down the fructans the same. So it is a little bit challenging to determine how much, yes, and as Shani mentioned there too, it also depends on how much fermentation is occurring as well. So that can make it challenging, but some true sourdoughs are low FODMAP. That might be a bit of trial and error. Yes, I make my own sourdough. Fabulous. Is there any other questions, Shani, that stood out to you that you'd like to jump on? I'll also do some.
Yes, we've got one here from Kathy. Could you address Lynn's question earlier about how far back to look at what you've eaten to try to determine what's caused a diarrhea episode? So like, should we look at what was eaten the night before, what was eaten an hour before, all that sort of thing?
Wonderful question. So what I often tell people originally before I know their gut, or if I haven't worked with them, is anywhere from 4 hours to 12 hours. But if people have constipation, some of my clients were actually looking at 24. I have a few clients that have a lot more IBS-C that we're even looking at that 48-hour mark. So it depends on motility. So what we like to, or movement through the digestive tract. So when we are digesting FODMAPs, the FODMAP reaction is occurring in our colon. And so when we first eat a food, it goes into our stomach, and then it has to make its way through our small intestine, and then it has to make our way into the colon. And that can take hours, if not many, many hours for a lot of individuals. Once it's in the colon, that's where that fermentation and gas and bloating can occur. Now, if you feel like it's happening right after a meal, it definitely can be right after that meal, as that meal you're eating is pushing food through your digestive tract where it's then fermenting. Another piece I would say is some individuals with SIBO or small intestinal bacteria overgrowth will also experience symptoms a little bit more quickly, or if you have really quick motility. And so that's where starting to learn your motility or movement through your digestive tract is helpful. Streptococcus, what is this? And what is this? And it's out of balance. I know gut-ish. I'm not 100% sure I'm understanding that question. How do you promote diversity without stacking? Great question. I often recommend incorporating a FODMAP-free or a fairly low FODMAP food per meal, as well as a variety of foods from different FODMAP groups. So I might actually pull up a quick handout that I have. So in terms of the different FODMAP groups, this is a hidden members only handout, but I'll show you guys because it'll help me explain. Oh, it's even doesn't have the full groups on it. But what we have done is categorize the different foods by FODMAP as well. And so choosing one from each different FODMAP group can be helpful. So for example, there's some that we want to fully avoid, but if we incorporate, for example, 2.6 ounces or less of green beans, we're going to be getting a little bit of sorbitol, and we might do a little bit of broccoli. Again, we want to stick less than the high FODMAP portion. So maybe we'll have 1 ounce of broccoli to incorporate a low FODMAP portion from another category as well. Another really good resource for that is called the University of Michigan has My GI Nutrition. And they have a really good chart that you can use, I think under tools. So if you choose, again, we want to stick with a low FODMAP portion, but choosing foods from different categories in a low FODMAP portion can also help with that as well. This isn't the exact one I was thinking of because this only has the high FODMAP foods on it. But there are some that have that lower FODMAP portion or low FODMAP foods and which categories they fall into to help minimize that stacking as well. Please explain BAM. So BAM is bile acid malabsorption. So that's when we consume fat, our body releases bile acids to break down fat. Ideally, these bile acids are then reabsorbed. If individuals' bodies aren't reabsorbing those well for a variety of reasons, they get too low in our digestive tract and can cause a lot of irritation. That irritation can cause or contribute to diarrhea, especially like a yellowy diarrhea, burning diarrhea, or really loose urgent diarrhea. That there's a few varieties of ways to manage that. One would be managing how much fat you're having per meal. Another one would be pairing a fiber, especially a soluble fiber, can sometimes help, not necessarily insoluble, which speeds motility up, as well as some individuals will need to utilize a medication to help with binding that bile as well. And then supporting the bacteria in our gut that help reabsorb BAM. Bile acids will also be helpful. I would avoid any supplements that contain ox bile, for example, if you have BAM or bile acid malabsorption, but you could always use a little bit of lipase to help with fat breakdown. Okay, I'm just looking at the clock. And so if anybody does have to go early, I will not be offended. I might just answer one or two more questions because there is a lot of them here. And yes, I will be sending the FODMAP Eat This Not That list to anybody who's registered right after this, as well as a few of our other guides. You will click on the link and it will give you an option to download the PDF as well. I'm taking Nexium for reflux. Will I have to take them forever? Really good question. That really depends on your digestion, and I can't answer that without unfortunately knowing a little bit more clinically about you, as well as what's going on digestive wise. Yes, and that great question. Doctor can help with that one. And perfect. Okay, I think I don't. Oh, the one last one I do want to answer. My IBS started straight after COVID. It is very common. There's actually quite a few, I shouldn't say very common, but it's more and more common. And there has been some fabulous research about post-infectious IBS post-COVID. And for some individuals, it starts during COVID, some after, and some months after as well, up to 3 months after. This is a type of post-infectious IBS. Some people will get post-infectious IBS after flus or food poisoning or traveler's diarrhea too, but it is happening after COVID as well. Our management is going to be fairly similar in the sense that there's a specific probiotic that we often like to use, but the low FODMAP elimination and reintroduction to determine triggers can be often helpful after those shifts as well, both shifts in our bacteria, but also shifts in our vagus nerve that occurred during infection as well. Do we work with people via Zoom? Yes, our entire program is via Zoom. We work with people globally, all over the world as well. Definitely do our quiz, our diet versus disease quiz. See if you're a good fit. And then from there, you can book in directly into our calendar to speak with someone on our team about what program might be a good fit for you. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you found some value and some tidbits. We will be sending the recording out after. Any other questions you have, please feel free to send them to our hello@dietversusdisease.org account, or you're welcome to message Joe on Facebook. I'm going to throw Joe in there as well. And for anything else, please keep your eye out on our email list. We will likely do another webinar. Shani and I think have done 4 together now. So I'm sure we will do another one coming up here. We'll have another one in the next month or so. I'm thinking of doing one with Julie, one of the counselors on our team, as well, to chat about, again, how our mental health can be impacted by IBS. If there's any other topics that you're wanting, please let us know. Also, if you're looking for some additional free support, please feel free to join our FODMAP Reboot group on Facebook. And I see all the thank yous. You're all very, very welcome. Thank you so much for joining. And I hope to see you all soon. And perhaps I will work with some of you soon. I see some people I already do as well. Awesome. Okay, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I am so glad that you were able to be here and join me for today, and join Shani.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care.